Hi everyone, this is Laurent coming at you from the Break Zone with another episode of our Deck Tech series. This one going over Wind Lightning that was piloted by Kyle Mcginty to a top 4 finish at the ARG Circuit Summoner Series Ifrit 2 in Las Vegas. Kyle Mcginty is a very strong player. Um, he's one of the creators of the Meta Potion Circuit, and some of the cards that help him uh, be so successful in Las Vegas was Al-Cid, our favorite Salt Bay. So he's a 4 CP lightning forward. When Al-Cid enters the field, choose one active forward opponent controls. You may play one lightning forward of cost 3 or less from your hand onto the field. If you do so, deal it 6,000 damage, and he is a 6,000 power forward. Um, Very strong tempo card, one of the main reasons that you would play a lightning deck. What usually happens is your opponent will play a forward, and if that forward is active, because most of them don't have haste, in return, during your turn, you will play Al-Cid and break their forward and get 2 forward into play in turn. So if you play Al-Cid in combination with Rygdea, for example, you'll be able to deal 9,000 damage to a forward and dull another forward of your opponent that your opponent controls. If you play Al-Cid with Onion Knight, it'll be 11,000 damage. And another card that combos really well with Onion Knight is another copy of Onion Knight, a different one actually. And this one I'll actually read it out. So it's 4 win CP. When Onion Knight enters the field or attacks, choose one forward, deal it 3,000 damage. When Onion Knight enters the field, choose one card Onion Knight of any element except wind in your break zone, add it to your hand. His special is Job Change Ninja, discard a copy of itself, place Onion Knight at the bottom of your deck. If you do so, search for one card Onion Knight with Job Sage and play it onto the field. And he's 7,000 power. So what happens is, if you play this Onion Knight and you have the other Onion Knight in your break zone, you'll be able to effectively deal 3,000 damage followed by another 5,000 damage by using the special and end up with a 6,000 power lightning forward in play. Another card that combos with Al-Cid is Black Waltz. So the thing with Black Waltz is that it actually deals power reduction, and also he's very effective at attacking into or blocking forwards are larger than itself, up to 8,000 power. Reason being that if he breaks, he would be able to do another 2,000 power reduction. Orlandeau plays really well with the theme of this deck, that is to deal damage. There are other cards I'll be showcasing later on, such as Cactuar, that help Orlandeau actually pull off the fact that he'll be able to come into play and break it forward. And his special is actually relevant enough that in case your opponent decides to attack and you have a Orlandeau that's dull, you'll be able to activate it if needed and block that forward if you need to. Angeal Penance also plays along with that theme of damaging your opponent's forwards and then breaking them. Being that if your opponent goes all in on you and taps out all their forwards, has no blockers, you'll be able to haste and play Angeal Penance, be able to deal damage to your opponent, and if you have, for example, Cactuar in play, you'll be able to deal 1 damage to it, have a damage forward, and break it. Barbariccia is also pretty darn useful in terms of if your opponent has very large forwards that are difficult to deal with, she'll be able to reduce them down to 1,000 power. Keep in mind that the power reduction will reduce the power of the forward, but any anthem such as plus 1,000 power backups will actually keep your opponent's forwards at 2,000 power, meaning that a combination of Barbariccia and Cactuar will be able to normally break any forward unless the opponent controls a backup or a character that would give plus 1,000 power to that forward. Zidane is also a very much of a value card. Reason being that not only are you able to pick and choose, look at your opponent's hand, pick and choose one card for them to have to discard, but he also gets larger when your opponent has a smaller hand size. And the fact that he costs 3, but takes a card away from your opponent makes him a theoretical 1-cost card, and that can be very effective. I mean, if you're able to get him to be 7,000 power for theoretically 1 CP, that is definitely a win on in my book. Moogle, another very good card in terms of card economy. When he enters the field, draw a card. When he's put from the field into the break zone, draw a card. So if you're able to use Cactuar or other means to have Moogle trade up with your opponent's forwards, you get to draw a card on top of it, and that is really going to push your game state forward. The only summons that you play in this deck are actually Raiden, but if you've ever been able to cast it, this card is very good, to say the least. I mean, it deals with forwards that normally can't be broken. It also deals with forwards that have abilities that trigger when they are put into the break zone, and just the fact that you're able to use one card to deal with 2 forwards of any cost is a win in my book. I mean, choose up to 2 forwards opponent controls, remove 1 forward from the game, and break the other. There's definitely a lot of times you're going to look at a board and you're like, I really don't want to see that forward there, and I want to break that one, but if I do, something bad happens, like let's say a Rinoa. With Raiden, you'll be able to remove that Rinoa from the game, thus she won't be able to dull down your forwards, and you'll be able to break another forward, and sometimes that's enough to win. Let's go over some backups, one of them being Archer. The reason why I'm going over this one is that it's actually quite important if your opponent plays water and has a min-win play. Al-Cid will have a difficult time getting around it. Same thing with Cactuar. But if you were to break their min-woo once they start feeling very safe, you can really have them walk into some traps that you set up, and so do some combos where maybe they'll play a larger forward, decide that they're safe enough, or even attack with it, and then after that you can go with your Archer, break their min-woo, tap down your Cactuar, deal 1000 damage, and then do some other shenanigans and perhaps break a couple of their forwards. Another backup that's actually pretty relevant is Red Mage. Reason being that if you're playing against another Lightning deck where they're trying to play Al-Cid on your forwards, being able to haste out your forwards after building enough backups is actually going to keep them from being able to target it, since Al-Cid needs an active forward as a target. Gramis is another key part because Category 12 would actually include Al-Cid. So if you have one of the other combo pieces but you don't have Al-Cid, Gramis is going to help you search out the card that you need. Last but not least, we're going to go with the monster Cactuar. Key part of this deck, actually, that along with Al-Cid. 1 win CP, monster, dull, choose 1 forward, dealing 1000 damage. 1 win, 2 colorless, dull. Put Cactuar into the break zone, choose 1 forward, deal it 10,000 damage. Cactuar deals you 1 point of damage. EX burst of cards put into the damage zone due to this ability cannot be used. So that's a little bit of a flavor ability in terms of how it relates to the Final Fantasy games. Cactuar is known to deal 10,000 damage, and with his ability of 10,000 needles, and his first ability of just dull and deal 1000 damage combos really well with some of your other abilities, your other forwards. I mean, all of a sudden Moogle can trade up with 7,000 power forwards, or Angeal Penance or Orlandeau have the condition that they need in order to break forwards already met. Also note that Cactuar is a standard unit, no, not really a standard unit, but you can have multiple copies of Cactuar in play at the same time, and it's a generic unit. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but you get the meaning. The multiple symbol on the top right. Anyways, if you have 3 Cactuars in play and you have a Moogle, all of a sudden your Moogle can trade with uh, 9,000 power forwards. And if you're facing down something like a Delita, playing the Cactuar's break zone ability will, while you take 1 point of damage, you'll be able to deal with a Delita, which is normally a big thorn in your side. So hopefully you'll enjoy the fact that I went over this deck tech. If you haven't tried this deck, you probably should. And if you're not playing this deck, then at least be aware of the strengths and weaknesses of this deck, and probably you should probably make it part of your gauntlet. I mean, I recently read a article from Matthew Okimoto regarding some of the top decks and things to watch out, decks to watch out for in the upcoming tournaments, such as Petite Cup in Tampa, as well as the Break Zone Circuit first event of the year. If you haven't played against this deck, it is something to be aware of. It is not. It is definitely a very strong deck, and like I mentioned earlier, if you're not playing it, at least test against it because there's a high chance that it's going to be out there. So good luck to everyone, and catch you soon.